we are live, and quite the party music for this topic, which is about all of the mistakes we've made. But to those of you joining, welcome in. To those of you watching the recording, I'm sure there's great content for you, whether you're listening to us on 1.2 or 1.5 speed. My name is Sara Archer, and I am the Chief Revenue Officer at ChartMogul, and I am going to be moderating today's panel, which is all about mistakes that founders make in sales. And so we've got about 45 minutes and some esteemed panelists here who I'll ask now to introduce themselves before we get started. Johannes, would you be so kind to kick us off?
Yeah, hi, my name is Johannes. Karjula, I'm a founder and the CEO at Trustmary, and I have done B2B sales since 2010. And my biggest mistake, I tried to, when I saw the topic of this panel, I tried to find that I have done so many mistakes, but what is the biggest one? And then I remembered that when we started to transform our outbound sales SaaS business to global product-led growth approach and started to go global with the help of the PLG, and we read all the books related to product-led growth, and we stopped doing sales. And I think that was the biggest mistake, because we thought that if you are doing a product-led growth, you need to focus on the self-service funnel. You need to let the users and the clients go further without any human help to get the understanding then what are the bottlenecks and so on. And so we followed those books maybe too strictly, and it took so long to understand that what the users actually wanted. But when we started to do the sales again, it took only a while when we got all the answers related to bottlenecks and everything. So that was our biggest mistake.
Yeah, there's a lot of advice out there, whether it's on LinkedIn or books, and it's hard to know exactly what to pay attention to. So great. Yeah. Well, good to have you on. Roee,
nice to be here.
Yeah, thank you. Roee, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, thank you very much. So my name is Hartuv, and I'm heading the go-to-market practice at WillingnessToPay. I started my career in sales, and I'd say around 5 years ago, I started advising scale-ups around go-to-market strategy, specifically around pricing and packaging. And my biggest mistake, I never founded a company. So on that topic, I can say that my biggest mistake was to join a company too early as a sales leader. All right, so you do your due diligence, and I did my due diligence back then. They were almost at 1 million in ARR, or actually it wasn't really ARR. I thought it was ARR. So I decided to leave a very comfortable job where I was very successful. The company was already running, heading the sales there. And I decided to go back and join an early stage company. And then I did, and I joined too early. There was no sales motion. Basically, the product was not ready. I was just sitting around waiting for the product to mature. And the revenue that we did have was not really ARR, a lot of pilots, a lot of those stuff. Yeah, and because of that mistake, I found myself leaving the company less than a year after.
Sure. Due diligence around finding the right job is definitely a skill. I've come to believe. And so, yeah, I think everybody gets burned at least once. So thanks for sharing. I'm sure that's a bit of catharsis for the audience. And finally, we've got Seth. Seth, I'll see you shortly in, I think, a couple of different countries. Our paths cross sometimes, which is fun. But for those of you that don't know about your background, please tell us about yourself and maybe one of the bigger mistakes you've made. Oh, we've lost your mic. Or perhaps you're muted. Give you a sec and then I'll...
Let's go back to this.
Perfect.
Here we go. Thanks, Sara. My name is Seth DeHart. I'm a venture partner at Point9. Career in sales. Last 5 years, started advising founders on founder-led sales. And then after working with about 100 startups, just started Founder-Led Sales, a platform for helping founders navigate the stuff we're talking about today and more. Biggest mistake for me, and I think this happens to a lot of people, I call it the Moby Dick deal. You get one deal in your pipeline that is the savior deal. It's enormous. When you finally land this thing, everything will be great. And you chase that deal for months and quarters, neglecting all else. And often takes down the ship, takes down the business. And I've learned from that it's okay to have some big enterprise deals in your pipeline, but focus on the small wins and closing deals regularly, and be wary of the Moby Dick deals.
Oh man, that like brings up a trauma for me, which is
Do you have a
I
few?
was chasing a Moby Dick deal, like a $3.7 million deal earlier in my sales career, and my champion said, "You guys are the vendor of choice." But I didn't realize that procurement had, as a part of their standard process, to issue us an RFP, or a request for proposal. And I was like sitting pretty thinking like, I just closed the biggest deal of my career, and somehow put the wrong deadline for the RFP in my calendar and was three days late. So ended up having to pull like an all-nighter to put together a 98-page RFP answering security questionnaires. And yeah, I mean, it's true. The mistake can be small, like on an individual deal, it can be strategic and can threaten the business. And so we're going to talk, to this group today about some of the learnings across everyone's individual experiences. And so, Johannes, maybe I'll direct this first question here to you. Of course, as the founder of Trustmary, in my experience, a lot of founders struggle making peace with sales and to get comfortable with being uncomfortable with the rejection that comes with the territory. So, what was your experience like? What mental shifts did you need to make? And how do you think about, the role of a founder and sales?
I think that I have always had the right mental thinking that around the sales, and I have always loved to do sales and meet the clients. But I have some co-founders in other companies also where I'm involved, and I have seen that I have needed to do a lot of mental shifting for my co-founders many times to get them to do sales also, because they think that maybe a little bit too stereotypically that sales is something pushing or cold calling and telling your own things and own stories and telling things about your products and the features. But I have tried to tell them that actually great sales is problem solving. You are helping the clients to understand the problems better, and you are helping them to solve those problems. And once you understand that your job as a founder is to be best at solving the customer problem, and the better you are solving the problem, the better business you are having. And once you understand that, it is making it a little bit easier to focus and spend time with sales. And that is something we talk a lot with the co-founders, that we need to spend more time with the clients. We don't actually talk about sales. We talk about that we need to spend time more with the clients. And when you are solving the issues and the problems, the sales comes pretty much automatically. So that's my my tips for this topic.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like you've been really successful in reframing the conversation around problem solving for individual customers. And I love that. Seth, you work with lots of founders. Maybe some folks struggle with this more. From your point of view, where do you see folks getting stuck?
Yeah, I think Johannes really kind of nails it, that it's not, well, to answer your question, I think people over-engineer founder-led sales and sales in general. And when you boil it down, it's really these natural conversations with prospects, trying to understand if their needs or their pain can be solved with your value proposition and your offering. And like when you describe it like that, it sounds quite practical, right? So it's like, it's not this over-engineered sales process. It's a rather natural flowing thing. Now, there's certainly tactics you can use in selling, certainly as you get further along, but I think it's, doing exactly as Johannes said and having those conversations, and then understanding, I guess maybe the key to the sales aspect is getting a close do you want to keep talking about this? Do you want to try this product? Will you exchange your cash for our value proposition, right? I guess maybe that's the harder part, is getting us some sort of conclusion, not just kind of leaving it open and floating away. And I think that, maybe that's the harder part about sales, is that you get the harsh truth. But I think those conversations, it's natural conversations. And I think that's also searching for product market fit, right? It starts there and having those natural conversations. So it's not like you've found product market fit, now you have to be a salesperson. It starts with those natural conversations. As Johannes said, like that's the same as finding product market fit. It's the same as finding if the prospect values your offering. And then maybe the closing part of maybe bringing it to some sort of conclusion is the harder sales aspect. But again, that's just asking, kind of a question of whether they want to continue on the journey with you or not.
Yeah, sure. I mean, very few folks have like hard negotiation skills when they start their like sales journey, and you need lots of at-bats to sort of build that muscle. But maybe a challenge.
You don't need it to sell, right?
Sure.
You don't need it to sell.
But you'll get it over time, right?
Yeah.
I think that you're both converging on, okay, we're having real productive conversations with folks. And sometimes that's going to be fortuitous and lead to a long-term relationship where we can provide you with a service or product that solves a specific problem within your business. And other times it's a lesson learned for us on our journey to product market fit, and what kinds of folks we should be targeting and how we should be approaching them. So Roee, maybe a question for you is, okay, in early days, figuring out how to get those meetings can be really challenging, and there's lots of different advice on how to generate leads, how to get those first few meetings or conversations. And so, you've joined early startups where maybe everything was kind of in flux. So what advice would you have for founders trying to figure out what's the right go-to-market motion? Should I do something product-led? Should I be leveraging partnerships, or how do I go about finding these people to begin with?
Yeah. So first of all, you don't know what's the right go-to-market motion for you. And in a lot of cases, let's be honest, you test a few things and until something sticks. You can design, and that's basically who you want to. Let's start off. You build a company. You found a company because you have a problem that you think you have a solution. Now the next question, hopefully you start off with that, and not like some companies that start off with the solution and then find a problem to solve, right? So let's say that we have a problem, we build a solution to solve that problem, and then hopefully who has the problem that you can solve. Mm-hmm. And this is the people that you need to find. Now, based on the people or the companies that you need to find, then you probably need to ask yourself, how can I reach them? Is it going to events? Is it picking up the phone and doing outbound? Is it product-led growth? For example, product-led growth, Atlassian is the company that is well known for starting product-led growth, right? And they discovered that their target audience will never talk to a salesperson. These are the developers, right? Developers don't like to be sold to. The way they buy is differently. So they said, hey, we need to take the salespeople out of the equation and get to our target audience using other means, product-led growth and everything that is to do with that. So you need to think about who has the problem, how do they like to communicate, how can I communicate, and what is the right go-to-market motion to start having those conversations.
Yeah, when I work with founders, I like to challenge them on where do your buyers hang out? Where do they hang out? What do they consume? How do they consume it? What kind of information do they find interesting? What kind of resources are helpful for them in their jobs? And I do a little bit of Techstars mentoring. And so a lot of founders I work with have some sort of outbound motion in early days to get meetings through warm intros or cold LinkedIn. And I'm always encouraging them simultaneously to think about a long tail content strategy and building some sort of asset that gives them some credibility to show up in that space and say, okay, well, here you are on Reddit talking about, taking your freemium away from your SaaS product. Here's some data, or here's some research, and sort of establishing yourself as, someone that has smart and interesting ideas by participating in that space. So yeah, I think that's really interesting advice. And I don't know why developers don't want to talk to us salespeople. We're fine most of the time.
Well, I kind of know why. Right?
Well, tell me.
I don't think we do a good enough job, right?
Yeah. Meeting them where they are, or what do you mean specifically?
Sellers in general, right? Like we are all being approached left and right, LinkedIn, calls, emails, etc. Yeah. We even don't want to be sold to, right? So yeah.
I think part of it comes from like a knowledge base, right? So you always have a power dynamic between a buyer and a seller. And so if I'm sitting behind my laptop in my shared London flat with my 4 roommates, playing music, and I'm coming to the table and say, oh, here's why you should change something in your business, without any baseline knowledge, having never worked in the industry, it's a bit too far-fetched, right? And so, the best sellers probably that are successful in selling to developers probably know about some of what they do, or care, or are interested in those topics that are relevant. So that's been my experience, but very interesting. Now, Johannes, you've run both a product-led and a sales-led motion, and so you're curious to get your thoughts on this topic. What are the signals of a go-to-market motion that has some traction? Because you're right, you might not know, you might need to try things out over time. So what's it been like from your point of view?
Yeah, I think I have learned a couple of big things during that product-led growth motion we have done. And when we started to go global, the first thing is that if you want to be global, we need to have a global product, and we need to broke all the barriers related to reaching us. So when we thought that maybe we should have a so cool self-service product that it can be used everywhere globally. So that's why the product-led growth was the thing we started to do. But during those years when we had done it, I had learned that through the product-led growth, you will get engineers, you will get the people who are able to use a lot of technologies and the software. And that's the one ICP. So if you are serving these kind of users, it's good to have a product-led growth motion. Maybe you need to test it. But the second one is that if you are like us, when you are serving a service-based traditional industries, the CEOs and the business owners and the marketing managers of traditional industries, they are not tech-savvy people. But still they want to test our product without any help, but they are looking for solution, but they are coming from very micro businesses, very small businesses. And maybe this is a little bit bad to say things like that, but they had too much time and not enough money. So you need to have a lot of time to do that self-service and testing a different kind of solutions. And as we know, all the salespeople know, when you are having some kind of big enterprise segment, those people, they have less time and a lot of money. And that's why they are very good doing outbound sales, but you need to help them and you need to reach them through outbound methods. And they are not ever going to find you through the search engine or something like that.
Cool. Very good. Well, I'm curious, you figure out who your buyers are, you start to really understand, where they hang out. And then you're looking for these signals of, okay, now we're getting these meetings and we're talking to these people, they're experiencing the product, and hopefully they have a lot of money. That's ideal. And they spend it willy-nilly with little to no procurement. But of course, reality is, and it's tough right now, like buyer scrutiny is very high. And so I want to talk a little bit about discovery. And so provided you're getting these conversations they need to be meaningful, and you need to go sort of beyond surface level to progress deals forward as you get into this territory that Seth mentioned, where, okay, now we're starting to talk turkey, if you will. We've gone sort of beyond the, okay, yeah, this is interesting. What might it be like to work together? So this question is all about what you've learned about sales discovery. And so, Seth, maybe I'll point this in your direction first. Can you give us some practical advice for founders to really hone in on their discovery sales skills?
Yeah, I think it goes back to this theme that we've been kind of talking through early on about, founders becoming salespeople, which is having honest conversations with prospects and doing more listening than talking, right? So if I look at a great discovery, it's really getting the prospect to talk, to understand what their potential needs are, whether there is a product market fit with them and their needs and your offering. So I think, going into it with pitching things, just talk for a moment what not to do. Very often the discovery goes right into like, let me show you buttons of my product, right? And these well-trained salespeople that it sounds like we're aspiring for founders to become, right? These are the ones who are often the worst at just getting in there. They know their product inside and out. They want to show buttons. And I was guilty of that early in my career. It's like those buttons are meaningless unless they solve a problem, and you don't know which buttons to show, right? And so where does that start? That starts with a conversation, right? And so the best salespeople and the best founders are having a conversation that doesn't feel like an interrogation, right? It starts with a list of questions you want answered, but ideally you're not just asking those questions to get answers, you're having a conversation. So that's an art in selling, would be to get them to speak without having to ask many questions, to learn everything you need to know. And then also understanding at the end of that conversation or that kind of Q&A and obviously the art of it is to building credibility to get them talking without, feeling like an interrogation. And then knowing that maybe it's not a fit, right? I think that's a great way to go into a conversation, to say, well, let's have this conversation to see if it is a fit. Right? That kind of takes the pressure off. Like, I'm not coming into this to sell you something. I'm coming in because I don't know if it's a fit either. And the best salespeople actually walk away from those conversations early on and say, it sounds like this isn't a fit for you. Right. And that's the opposite of what you think as a salesperson. You think the salesperson is trying to sell them, convince them, manipulate them, get them to give them money. But it's actually the best are qualifying out prospects who aren't a good fit and having that honest conversation. So to say, hey, it sounds like this, and this could be really valuable for you. Is that true? Great. Then taking it from there into a demo or into a further sales process of demonstrating that. That's where you would show the buttons in the demo. Say, you said this would be valuable. Let me show you how we solve that. These are the buttons that do it, and literally only showing those. Now I get a little bit further along into kind of the demo, but I think that's people skip all the conversation, the discovery, and get right into the demo. So putting the demo aside, the discovery is that understanding whether you should even take it even further.
Yeah, a lot of founders that I work with are surprised when they ask me, how do things work at ChartMogul? Like, what does your process look like? Specifically around demoing, I tell them, like, I might show 15% of the product. And I think that's hard for founders who've built something that they're really proud of, and they want to showcase, all of the capabilities of the cool things that they've worked really hard on. And so, the vast majority of the conversation is around, okay, well, what might your world look like if you had something like this? You're doing that discovery, and then you're just showing the relevant points. But I'm just thinking of two founders.
Think about that, right? Like, showing things that are not valuable dilutes the value immediately. Like this is common sense stuff. This isn't sales. It's like diluting the value of something. And then when you show the 15% that's really valuable, they remember that. But if you showed 100%, they'd say, I have to pay for 85% of the things that I'm not even going to use. That sounds really complicated. I don't even need all that stuff. Right? Imagine how bad that sales process is if you're showing things they don't need when you could have just showed what they needed. So I think it's like going back to that. Don't show things, right, of your product if you don't know that it's going to be valuable. At the very least, it just dilutes the true value. When sales is hard enough to exchange that value for money. So if you dilute that value, you're done.
Yeah,
Can I jump in here and be more blunt? Of course, I did this mistake, so I'm talking from my personal experience. But nobody cares about how much money you raised. Nobody cares if you went to YC25. Nobody cares how many offices and how many people you have in your team, right? And now nobody cares about the features and buttons.
And I don't care that you're ex-Google either.
That's right. They only care about themselves, about their problems, and if they have a problem, how you can solve it to them. So this is a discovery call. That's what the discovery call should be all about. What are your problems? Let's see if I can solve your problems. That's it.
Yeah. And once you have a good understanding of those problems, it can be helpful to work with your customer to sort of reimagine what the future might look like if they took this path. I'm a big classic literature nerd, and I really like Kurt Vonnegut has this thesis he wrote about the shapes of stories. And I always use this when I'm working with founders because most stories have sort of a similar narrative. Once upon a time, you encountered a problem and you implemented a solution, and then you all live happily ever after. And so if you do some nice baseline discovery, then you can sort of work with your customer to sort of tell this story of what could be. But I think at the same time, to your earlier point, Seth, this does mean qualifying people out and saying, oh, this isn't a problem that we can help with, right? And so that's a question I always ask sales candidates when I'm hiring. Tell me about a time you walked away from a deal. Why, what happened, and what did you learn? And I think this goes back really nicely to your point, Johannes, around leading with honesty and just, having this mindset where you're like, we're people having a prudent conversation about, whether or not we can work together. And so it is what it is. And maybe that's, let's shake hands and call it a day.
Yeah, you're right. So I have that saying that if you don't know what to do next, try honesty, and so that is always working. And
yeah,
I used to have those first calls when we started that I called the company, the owner of the company I wanted to have a meeting with, and I told him honestly that I have a strong feeling that we should sit down and have a time together, and both of us would get a lot of value from that. And of course he asked, okay, tell me more. Why? And then I started to ask the questions that I'm not sure that do we need to have a 1 hour or half hour, but I have some questions, and based on the answers you are going to give me, I will tell you that should we sit down and spend time together. So honesty is always working when you are doing sales.
And I want to say, like, the mismatch here or the disqualify for early stage, it usually looks something like this. Can you integrate with our Workday? Do you have this feature to be able to solve this? This is how usually early stage companies, this is what you hear. And now it's very hard to disqualify them out because, again, in the beginning, you're testing a lot of things. Can I integrate with Workday? And then you go back to your R&D. How much time will it take us? And back to the well hunting, right? How much time will it take us? Because that's a very important logo. So in real life, this is what happens. And where exactly to cut this off? Yeah, that's a big dilemma always.
I guess, what would you do if someone says, can I integrate with Workday? And you're in a place where you need to close 10 customers, 12 customers. You can build it. It's a question of like, should you? I'm thinking of a conversation I had with a founder who said, I don't know what the answer to that question is. Can I integrate with Workday? Mm-hmm. Because the answer is, or sorry, rather, do you integrate with Workday? Yeah. The answer is no. And I want to be honest because that feels like authentically how I want to sell. But I also really need to close this customer. So like, what do I do? And I don't know if anyone has different advice, but I said, it takes X days, 3 days for us to integrate with Workday. But in order for us to invest the time and energy, like you've got to have skin in the game too. So, how serious are you about, doing a pilot or signing an agreement with us? And unfortunately, a lot of founders will give that work away for free, which sometimes you might be in a place where you have to do that. but getting buy-in from the customer is kind of where my brain went. But Seth, I saw you nodding. Maybe you have different ideas.
Well, I mean, most of the folks we're talking to don't have background in sales. So it's product knowledge people. And the expertise here, and the superpower is time management of what to build, when to build it, right? To make sure that you're doing this in the right order. And I think that's the art and magic of all of this, is these trade-offs. No, you can integrate. You can integrate with anything on any amount of time if you have unlimited time, but you don't. So it's like, that's the qualification. Do you need that deal? Is that deal going to derail other deals? Is that in line with the roadmap of other feature, or the feature that other companies need? Like, that's an exciting trade-off. And I would say most of the folks that are listening that are product, founders or product first founders or engineers, like, they're better than me at that. Right. So you better be real good at that when it comes to planning your roadmap and making those trade-offs, and not just, signing up for anything to win deals, or you're going to build an octopus. It's going to be a mess, and there'll be no ICP. There'll be no focusing kind of function.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, this question wasn't on our prep doc, but I think maybe it's worth asking. I'm curious if anyone has strong feelings about pilots or proof of concepts. So a lot of times founders trying to get their first, X number of customers will sign these proof of concepts, sometimes free, sometimes paid. And then the challenge is, okay, you have to deliver on that proof of concept or that pilot. And then you have to maybe even renegotiate in order to make someone stick around longer than the 3 months that they've invested over the course of this pilot. So does anyone have advice on whether or not, founding teams should offer pilots or proof of concepts?
I think when you are starting a SaaS business, you need to have some testers and the real customers in with any price. And that's why you need to be very open to do those pilots. But you need to be careful that what is the ICP you are serving and you are doing tests. Because if you are dealing with the wrong ICP, and which is actually not the ICP you are going to have, for example, globally in future, you are going to build wrong integrations and wrong features and wrong everything. So that's why the ICP thinking from the start is also very important. Of course, you are iterating that and you are testing different kind of things, but typically, if someone is starting some business, is having that problem, and I hope that they also know that who is owning that problem, and so what is the ICP. So, and maybe they have done some calculations that how many of these ICPs are in the world or in the territory we are working in, and so that's the market and so on. So, hope they knows the ICP. But I have always been open to have very free pilots, a lot of them, to understand the issues, and that is something what we also needed to. I want to tell a small story related to that, because when we started the product growth approach, and it took a long time to get the traction, some real traction. We got a lot of signups and users, free users, but not active users and not paying users. And once we installed the live chat and started to do proactive reaching through the live chat and started to have those calls and Google Meets with the users, we learned so quickly compared to the other. Before we tried to find that data from the mix panel on the other softwares and try to understand that what they are actually looking for. But after having those Google Meets with the very small micro businesses and the users, we started to learn so quickly, and we helped them very much without any price, and just to understand them better. And once we got the features better and we iterated everything, they started to pay, and we started to get the MR and the conversions and everything. But we did a lot of free work to get the right understanding.
Totally.
I would say it's a fantastic point. If you have to do, there's a lot to learn, but just make sure, first of all, and if you can charge money, of course, you should, but just make sure that you have clear success criteria. You have a clear way to go into a contract afterwards. So it should be something like, if we were to do a POC, what are the success criteria? If we are to reach those success criteria, will you make a decision to move forward? Yeah, so it's these things. What I've seen a lot of early stage companies do is like, okay, they give you the pilot and the users, no meetings, no when is the cutoff date, when do we meet again on the calendar. So just make sure if you do give a trial, somebody on the other side is committed to actually use and test and come back to you with their answers and move on to a commercial contract.
Yeah, we sold pilots for a little while at ChartMogul as we were trying to figure out how to increase our ASP, our average sale price, how we were going to sell to bigger customers, and we didn't really have the mechanics to do it. So we tried trials on, and this is very, very tactical, but I quite like structuring pilots or proof of concepts as 15-month agreements. So a 3-month agreement that rolls over into an annual commitment with a 2-week one-time exercise opt-out, because then you can kind of negotiate everything all at once, and you de-risk the commitment for the customer. But if we're going to enter into the commercial agreement negotiation phase, like let's just do it all together, instead of having to come back to the negotiation table, because especially if you're a startup, pretty much most all times you go to the negotiating table, you end up giving a little bit more than you'd like. And so it's better. That's something that I've had, some degree of success with, but we actually now don't sell pilots. They're a little bit challenging to administer from like a finance and operations perspective. And we sort of prefer to keep things really like clear and consistent. But if a sales rep came to me tomorrow and was like, I have this crazy deal and we want to do a pilot, I mean, you best bet we'd probably figure something out. So,
but I think the theme in the background here is like, it's a spectrum from like really deep integration proof of concept that cannibalizes the entire company to make this one deal successful. Yeah. And on the other end, there's just free trials that anybody can use on your website, like product-led growth, right? And on the, so I think it's a trade-off. And then also maybe the other axis is maturity of the company, right, Sara? So you've gone through maturity where in the early days you were doing it and later on you just don't do it unless it's an exception. So you need to be mindful of where you are in the maturity of the company and also how much time, I mean, that's the theme, I guess, for me today is like, how much time are you investing in things and whether it's worth, is there ROI in the form of revenue or learning to do these things, right? So, and certainly if you're investing time into it, that kind of proof of that success criteria or commitment, and ideally commitment of revenue is to back it up is important.
Yeah. I mean, it feels like the sort of through line from this conversation is around founders really focusing on talking to customers, unsurprisingly, but really staying like core focused on fundamentals, and a little bit of experimentation here and there, but just building this like unmatched knowledge of who your customers are, and how your product supports them, helps them solve business problems. So if you can get really, really deep in there, then you'll be unrivaled by your competitors. And at some point, hopefully able to abstract yourself away from sales to whatever degree you want to. So we only have about 5 minutes left. Maybe that's one last topic that we can kind of hit, which is, as a founder, when are you able to kind of, hand over the reins to sales? When is it time to start scaling sales systems? Johannes, do you want to take a first stab at that?
Yeah, I have had some struggling with that because I always be very sales minded and I want to be very close to the client. And we also started to do outbound with very raw product, and the retention and the NRR and everything was very low. And we tried to scale everything before the product is ready and before the retention process and the customer success process, and everything is ready. So I think that you need to be sure that the basics are done well before doing any scaling. And I mean that the churn and the retention is the thing. So you need to be sure that you can bring high value, and not just 1 month, but 2-3 months, and so very long time, and hopefully the NRR is more than 100%. So if you had these kind of numbers, then you know that, okay, let's have any people do the outreaching and try to find as many ICPs as possible to be our clients. So, but if you are struggling with the retention and the churn, then I think you should fix the product and fix the issues you are having with the product, and then maybe talk about the sales after when the basics are done well. Many times we think that we can hire more salespeople when we are, as a founder, we are ready to go away from the sales. But I think that the product needs to be ready based on the metrics, and then you are more ready to. Because when you are having a great product, you're going to have a lot of people doing sales, and they can do it well. But if you're having a bad product, you will face more problems if someone is selling it a lot, because so that's you are going to pay back to the clients and face the churn and face the retention and cash flow problems and everything.
Yeah, I mean, a bad product or a complex product, right? I mean, if I'm selling a Chrome extension that is plug and play, or something like, I don't know, that's super easy to adopt, you don't necessarily need a very passionate or knowledgeable salesperson to, I don't know, to sell that, although maybe it accelerates things. But I think, yeah, it's certainly true. And no one's going to be quite as passionate or knowledgeable as you, nor are your customers or prospects wanting to speak to account executive who joined 6 months ago, as much as they want to talk to a founder that controls the roadmap, that controls the vision, that has all of the escalations there. So yeah, good tips. I appreciate that. Anyone else want to chime in on that topic?
Yeah, I just want to say bad news. Founders never step away from sales. Right? That's how it is. In the beginning, you sell to individual customers. Sometimes you go in and help individual deals to close.
Yeah.
But you need to sell your company to investors to get the next funding. It's all about sales. It's the same thing. Just a different audience. So you're still selling there. I would just like to give one more tip based on my personal experience. If you're a founder and you're looking to hand it over, don't hire somebody to come in as head of sales. Start off with a seller, a passionate seller that might, hopefully you find somebody that might grow into that position. But somebody that the first hire should not be somebody that focuses on building a team and the processes. No, they need to repeat based on the foundation that the founder has built, and then start and continue to grow that over time. And then once you see it reach a certain point, I don't know exactly in terms of numbers, but then you can start hiring head of and additional team members.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the way that I look at this is through kind of these 6 phases of first finding product market fit. Who's going to do that other than the founder? And usually that's done in the sales motion of having these discovery conversations and see if there's value to add. Then making it repeatable in acquiring customers, right? Because you can't hire a salesperson to repeatedly acquire customers if there's no repeatability in that customer acquisition. To Johannes' point, are those customers even successful? Like, what's happening there? Then you can layer in your first sales hire once you have that repeatability. I like to think about it as the founders at capacity, right? Only if you had more time could you acquire more customers. This new first salesperson gives you that time, right? Not, I want to get out of sales. Let me hire someone, right? Then once you get that person to be predictable in their process, maybe you hire one or two, then you can start to layer in some more people, but you're selling next to them, right? You're not out of sales. Then once you have a handful of salespeople that require some management, then the founder is in a sales manager role, right? Understanding what's going on and making sure that the train doesn't go off the tracks. There will be certainly some abilities that a sales leader could bring in at that point. But if the founder can take it a bit further along, it de-risks everything and sets them up to understand what a sales leader should be doing, helps with the transition, helps them then manage that sales leader, right? So they become technically the CRO of a VP of sales or head of at that point. So if you go through these phases, you're kind of transitioning into being more leveraged, more value, but you're never, to Roe's point, you never transition out of sales, right? Because often 18 months of having a sales manager before often they end up being let go or quit or whatever happens. Who's going to be the sales manager at that point if not the founder? Nobody, right? So the founder has to step back in. So unless you learn those skills on the step going through those phases, the company's going to be in a lot of trouble and a lot of risk later on. So that's kind of the way I think about kind of transitioning through those phases versus transitioning out of sales.
Boom. Love it. Okay, grand. Well, this was fast and furious, and I'm sure there's more we could tackle, but we are at time. Feel free to connect with our lovely panelists on LinkedIn and reach out to the team here at ChartMogul if you are curious for more sales content. Otherwise, I will release you all back into what is hopefully a very pleasant day and share this content with you however you'd like to consume it later on. So thanks again, panelists, and yeah, take care, everyone.
Thanks, Sara.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.